right. Hey, Leif Grahamson, and if I pronounce your name wrong, I completely apologize. But in one of my previous videos that I put out, I was talking about the heavyweight division, and I had pointed out to when the Klitschko's came into the heavyweight division, it kind of changed everything and flipped it on its end to where it is just not the same anymore. And I think it could be for the better, but you know, and I talked about the size that they brought into it and the athleticism, and it just kind of changed the game. And he brought up that another commentator had said, well, there's always ebbs and flows with that as far as the size of the heavyweights and things like that. So I said, why don't I don't know why I do this, but why don't I check out all the heavyweights from, let's go back 100 years to the 1920s, and we'll take the top 5 heavyweights by the decade in each one of those decades, and we'll go through, we'll check out their height, we'll check out their weights, we'll average them out and see what the average was back then, and then we'll even compare it to the average height of the people back then as well, because I mean, what better way to compare is to see the difference in size of the heavyweights compared to the average man at that time. And I kind of used the United States as the model for that because I didn't want to do all that research, just some of it. So we looked at the, we looked at the observation, and I was wondering if that opinion was correct. So I wound up falling into a little bit of a rabbit hole there again, doing the height and weight of a typical person compared to today's. And so we went with the 1920s. We started out and we had Jack Dempsey, Sharkey, Gene Tunney, Godfrey, Willis. We looked at all those guys, and their average height was 6'1" and 200 pounds. So just think about that. And the average man was 5'5" then. So they were very big guys. There's no denying that at all. So we go to the 1930s, and this is Max Schmeling, this is Joe Louis, Canera, the big giant Italian, which totally threw everything off, as he was like 6'5", 261, and again, Sharkey was still in there, and there were a couple others. And when you average that out, and Primo Canera was if you took him out, it was a lot lower, but they averaged at 6'2", 217.8. So they got a little bigger. So you're like, okay, I see a trend. Do I see a trend? So let's look at the 40s. In the 40s was Joe Louis, Morello, Bivens, Walcott, Ray, and when you factored all their heights and weights in, and by the way, in the 30s they were averaging 5'6", as an average height. In the 40s they were averaging 5'6.5". So the average man is getting bigger. So you would expect the heavyweights. Is there a correlation there? I don't know. And there was 5'11" and 7/8 and 200 pounds. So without Primo Canera in there, it dropped back down 5'11 and 7/8, basically 6 foot and 200 pounds, which is roughly the same exact size as in the 1920s. If anything, just a skosh shorter. In the 50s, you had Rocky Marciano, you had Ezra Charles, you had Floyd Patterson, you had Valdez, you had Bob Baker. And when you looked at all them, the average height of a man then was 5'7". So again, they're getting a little bit taller. But for the heavyweights, you're still seeing 6 foot and 3/4 and 196.6 pounds. So their weight dropped a little. The height stayed roughly the same. But you're looking at a span now from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. Now, 40 years, roughly, 4 decades. And the weights and heights are almost exactly the same. If you went back 6 foot, 200 pounds, 6 foot, 200 pounds. So we go to the 60s. Now we're seeing a little bit of a change here. We've got Ali, You still have Patterson. You got Sonny Liston. You got Foley. You got Terrell. Terrell is kind of a tall guy there. And then that, you got 6'7" and 3/8", which is your average height. Again, still getting taller. And the heavyweights there are at 6'2", 205.8. So, again, 6'2", you had one tall guy in there that was 6'6", kind of throws it off a little bit, kind of like how Primo Carnera threw it off in the 30s. So, but they're 6'2", 205 pounds. That's a big dude. But when you looked at the height, now they're at 5'7" instead of 5'5", So, let's go to the 70s. Again, you still got Ali, you got Foreman. You should have Frazier in here. You have Ken Norton. You have Lyle. And I got all these top 5 heavyweights from Box Rec. It's one of the main ones that I go to when I'm looking for fights that are coming up, when I'm looking for rankings, when I look at the history of a fighter and the fights that they have and what's in their in the book on the side, kind of like the wiki thing, the breakdown of the fight kind of stuff. So then I go and look at videos off of that. So I use Box Rec. Sato Boxing I used to use a lot of, but those are my main 2 that I go to for when it comes to boxing. If you look at the, and again, their weight there was 6'2" and a quarter, 215.6. So they're starting to get a little bit bigger in the 70s there. We go to the 80s. Again, now you got Larry Holmes, you got Tim Witherspoon, you got Pinklin Thomas, Mike Tyson, Coetzee. And you look at them, and the average height of a man was 5'7" and 5/8", still getting taller. And their size was 6'2", 220. So, starting to get solid guys now with the 6'2", 220. We go to the 90s. This is Holyfield. This is Tyson. You have Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, Michael Moore. It's the top 5 there. And man is like 5'7" and a half. There's a little bit of dip in the average guy. So in the average height, we see go up a little bit at 6'2" and a half, and the weight goes up to 228. So there's an 8-pound jump there. They're getting bigger there in that Lewis era. I think Lennox Lewis kind of started it because he's 6'5" and could box, and did really well with that. Larry Holmes was around 6'2", 6'3". Lennox Lewis 6'5". 245. He's definitely that bigger guy coming into it. And then we go to the 2000s. This is where Klitschko's start coming into the thing, because you got Vladimir, you got Lennox Lewis, you got Chris Bird, you've got the other Vitaly Klitschko and Rahman in there. And then you see it go from the average height of a man was 5'9" in the 2000s. And then you have their size there jumps up to 6'4", and then 236.8 pounds. Now we're starting to get to the, these guys are getting crazy big. But it doesn't stop there. We have 2010s. And now you're looking at a 6'9", 270-pound Tyson Fury. You're looking at a 6'7" and 200, around 225 Deontay Wilder. You're looking at a 6'6", 248 Anthony Joshua. You're still looking at Klitschko, who's dominating the division for quite a while at 6'6", 245. You have Povetkin at 6'2", 229. So their average height there, when you're looking at these fighters now in that range, was 6'6", 242.4 pounds. So you take the average man at 5'9", and you have him at 6'6", you've got a 9-inch height differential right there. And if we're talking poundage-wise, you're talking 50 pounds heavier. If you go all the way back to the 1920s, where they were 5'5" and a half, and their average height was we'll give the 6'1" there, that's only a 7-inch difference, and the weights were a lot closer than what it is now. So I do believe the heavyweights are getting bigger. We can attribute this to, money in the sport. Floyd and Pacquiao are pretty much solely responsible for bringing all that in. Now, Conor McGregor coming over to the boxing side, made more in one fight than he made in his entire career in the UFC, in one fight in the boxing world. And you're seeing football players, or maybe people that were thinking about being football players, with the CTE and stuff like that. Believe it or not, football's really bad with that, and the training and stuff, as opposed to when you come over to boxing. At least boxing, the guys are typically your same weight, same size, whereas in football you could have a 300-pounder hitting a 200-pounder, and that really doesn't happen in boxing. So you're starting to see these other fighters coming over, and I think that's going to be the trend, is you're going to see these constant, giants, 6'7" and taller. You're a giant coming into that, and I think the era of the small guy is going to be gone. I don't see that happening. I mean, you've got the cruiserweight division now is at 200 pounds. So a majority of the heavyweight champions that we had in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way up to the 60s almost, would have been cruiserweights. And they would have been small cruiserweights when we look at it that way. Because we look at Alexander Usyk, who is 6'3" and was fighting at 200, and we know that he is a 217 to 220 pound guy now that he's fighting in the heavyweight division. So I think nutrition, training methods, all of that stuff has changed so much that those days of seeing a Mike Tyson at 5'10", 220 pounds and reigning as champion, I believe those days are over. We're looking at the land of giants pretty much anymore. Well, anyway, please comment, rate, subscribe to the video if you liked it. If you have any questions or videos you'd like to see me put out, I gave you a lot of information there. Thank you for sticking around so long. And, be safe. Hope you're healthy. And you have anything else, Eduardo? Sorry, man. I got carried away. I got wrapped up. I didn't mean to ignore you. I'm sorry. You okay? Okay. Eduardo's okay, so we're all right. We're all right. Yeah. Anyway, I'm the Big Ragu. I'm out. Yeah.